I still remember the exact moment my blood ran cold for the first time in my life. It wasn't a movie or a nightmare. It was a Thursday night during a school break. I had just gotten my first girlfriend, and we lived in one of those quiet, upper-class neighborhoods where everyone left their porches lights on. It felt safe. Too safe, as I would soon find out. My girlfriend, Casey, lived only 2 blocks away. I used to walk to her house almost every night without a second thought. But on this specific night, the streets felt different. The silence was heavier, pressing against my eardrums like a physical weight. I was walking alone, no cars passing, no wind blowing, just me and the darkness. I started hearing noises behind me, not the usual city sounds, but deliberate noises. The first one was the distinct rustle of a bush being shaken, not by the wind, because there was no wind. It sounded like a hand gripping the branches and rattling them hard. I turned my head for a split second without stopping my feet. I saw nothing. Just the long line of hedges separating the sidewalk from the wealthy properties. I told myself it was a stray cat. I picked up my pace, my sneakers making soft scuffing sounds on the pavement. But the moment I hit the next block, the sound changed. It was sharper, a twig snapping under a heavy foot. That was no cat. This time I stopped dead in the middle of the sidewalk. I spun around fully, my eyes scanning the bushes and the street behind me. It was completely empty. Streetlights buzzed overhead, casting orange pools of light on the asphalt. No joggers, no cars, just silence. But I felt it. The hairs on the back of my neck stood straight up. I was being watched. I know that feeling now. It is the primal instinct of prey realizing a predator is close. I started walking again, almost jogging. Casey's house was just 2 blocks away. I could see the roof over the trees. That's when the footsteps started. Quick, light footsteps. Not heavy like an adult man, but fast. They were matching my rhythm. I refused to turn around again. I kept my eyes locked on Casey's house. I pulled out my flip phone and called her. She picked up on the first ring. I tried to keep my voice steady, but I told her I was freaked out. I told her something was following me. She laughed at first, thinking I was joking. I walked past the bushes surrounding her driveway and stepped onto the concrete path of her property. Relief washed over me for just a second. I was safe. I looked up at her bedroom window on the 2nd floor. She was standing there, the phone pressed to her ear. She waved at me. I waved back, breathing heavily. Then her voice changed on the phone. It dropped to a terrified whisper. She asked me, "Who is that guy right behind you?" My heart stopped. The world went silent. I turned my head slowly, my neck stiff with fear. Standing maybe 10 feet behind me, crouched down like a sprinter ready to pounce, was a fully grown man. His face was pale. His eyes were wide and empty. I didn't think. I just screamed. I ran for the front door and started pounding on the wood with my fists, screaming for Casey's mom. The man lunged forward. He grabbed me by the shoulder and tried to lock my head under his arm. I felt his hot breath on my ear. Just as suddenly as he grabbed me, he let go. The sound of Casey's mom unlocking the door scared him. He turned and vanished into the darkness between the houses. Casey's mom pulled me inside and slammed the door, throwing the deadbolt. I collapsed on the floor, my heart beating 1,000 times a minute. I couldn't speak. I could only point at the door. They called the police immediately. I stayed there, shaking on the floor, realizing that if I hadn't called Casey when I did, if I had hesitated for just 1 more second, he would have grabbed me before I reached the door. I never walked alone at night again. The night started out like any other stormy evening. I was a teenager, locked in my room, watching TV while the rain hammered against the glass. I actually liked storms. The white noise helped me relax. My parents were downstairs in the living room laughing at some comedy show. My sister was upstairs playing video games. The house was warm and safe. But at around 11 o'clock, the storm got violent. The wind started howling, shaking the windows in their frames. I turned up the volume on my TV to drown it out. That's when the banging started. It wasn't thunder. It was a heavy, rhythmic pounding against my window glass. Thump, thump, thump. I jumped off my bed and pulled the curtain back just an inch. The rain was pouring so hard it was like a waterfall over the glass, but I could see a silhouette. A man. He was standing right outside my window, which made no sense because my room was on the second floor. He was on a ladder, or the roof. I don't know. He started screaming, but the rain was so loud I couldn't make out the words. I saw his mouth moving. He looked desperate. I opened the window a crack, and the wind howled in. I heard him yell, "Help me, please, I'm hurt." I felt a pang of sympathy. I shouted back at him to go around to the front door. I shut the window and ran to the living room. "Dad," I said, "there's a man outside. He's hurt. He needs help." My dad stood up from the couch, looking confused. Just as he reached for the front door handle, we heard it. Loud, frantic knocking on the front door. And the screaming for help started again, right outside our porch. My dad was about to turn the knob. I don't know why I stopped him. Maybe it was instinct. I yelled, "Wait!" Just then, the phone rang. It was our next-door neighbor. My dad picked it up. I watched his face turn pale. He said, "No way. No expletive way." He slammed the phone down and held his hand out to stop us. "Stay away from the door," he whispered. He crept to the window and peeled back the corner of the curtain. I watched his eyes go wide. He looked at my mom and mouthed the word knife. My dad yelled through the wood, "I have a gun! The cops are coming! Get off my property!" The pounding stopped, but we didn't move. We stood there in the dark living room, frozen. The phone rang again. It was the neighbor. He told my dad that he had seen a homeless-looking man rummaging through his garden shed. The man had walked out carrying a large wood chopping axe. My blood turned to ice. The man at our door wasn't just holding a knife. He had an axe, and he had been on my roof, trying to get in through my window. The police arrived 10 minutes later, but the man was gone. They found him wandering the streets the next morning, covered in mud and blood that wasn't his. He was screaming about needing to get inside. They never told us exactly what he wanted, but I knew. He wanted us. For 3 years after that night, I couldn't sleep without checking the locks 3 times. The storm is never your friend. It hides the footsteps. I was a really young kid, maybe 6 or 7 years old. I was in the living room watching my favorite cartoon with the volume cranked up loud. The house was quiet except for the TV. My mom was somewhere upstairs folding laundry, or so I thought. In the middle of a commercial break, I heard her voice. It was clear as day, coming from the basement. "Sweetie, come here." I called back. "Yeah, Mom?" No answer. I thought maybe she didn't hear me. She called again. "Come down here." Her voice sounded exactly like my mother, the same tone, the same warmth. But something felt off. It was too flat. There was no echo. I got up and walked to the basement door. It was dark down there. The light at the bottom of the stairs was off. I took a few steps down, my little feet cold on the wooden stairs. Halfway down, I called out again. "Mom, are you down here?" Silence. I looked around the corner into the pitch black of the basement. I couldn't see anything. I started to feel nervous. I turned around and ran back up to the top of the stairs. I thought I was just being a scared kid. But just as I reached the kitchen, I heard it again. "Come here." This time, the voice was definitely coming from the basement. But I had just checked. No one was there. I walked back to the top step. I leaned over the railing and looked down into the darkness. I couldn't see the floor. It was like looking into a void. Suddenly, the air changed. It got cold, really cold, like someone had opened a freezer. I felt a huge rush of horror wash over me, the kind that makes your stomach drop. I didn't wait. I didn't look again. I turned and ran as fast as my little legs could carry me, screaming for my mom. I found her coming down the upstairs hallway, drying her hands with a towel. She looked annoyed. "What is it?" she asked. I was crying so hard I could barely breathe. I told her that something was in the basement, something that sounded exactly like her. I told her it was calling my name. She looked at me with a soft, worried smile. "Honey, I've been upstairs the whole time. You must have imagined it." She went down to the basement to prove me wrong. She turned on all the lights. She checked every corner. The basement was empty, just boxes and old furniture. She hugged me and told me it was just the TV. But I knew the TV was off. I know what I heard. To this day, I don't go into dark basements, because whatever was down there that night, it knew my name, and it knew exactly what my mother sounded like. My grandpa doesn't scare easily. He lived on a farm 2 hours away from us, isolated from the world. He told me this story recently, and his hands were shaking when he finished. He used to have a little Boston Terrier named Sherry. Every evening at sunset, he would walk Sherry down the dirt path that ran along the woods next to his property. It was a routine, peaceful, until the day it wasn't. He was walking along, the sun dipping below the horizon, when he passed a stranger. The man had a large hood pulled up over his head, hiding his face. Sherry started barking and pulling at the leash. Dogs know things we don't. My grandpa said hello, being polite. The stranger just walked past without even turning his head. No nod, no greeting, just silence. My grandpa thought it was rude but kept walking. Sherry kept looking back over her shoulder, growling low in her throat. My grandpa kept shushing her, tugging on the leash. But the dog wouldn't stop. Finally, my grandpa turned around to see what the dog was looking at. His blood ran cold. The stranger had stopped walking away. He was standing behind a large oak tree about 50 feet back, but he wasn't hiding. He was staring directly at my grandpa, just the top half of his face visible over the bark. My grandpa started walking faster. He is old, but he knows how to move. He always carries pepper spray in his big coat pocket because of coyotes. He was getting closer to his farmhouse. He could see the porch light flickering on. That's when he heard the leaves crunching. Not 10 feet behind him, not 20, inches. The sound was right behind his heels. Before he could turn his head, he felt a hand clamp over his mouth. A gloved hand. It was warm and smelled like dirt and sweat. The man was pressing a rag or something against my grandpa's nose. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't scream. The man was strong. My grandpa felt himself being dragged backward toward the tree line. Sherry went crazy. The little dog was biting at the man's ankles, snarling and ripping at his pant legs. The man stumbled, loosening his grip just a fraction. That was all my grandpa needed. He shoved his hand into his pocket and pulled out the pepper spray. He didn't aim. He just sprayed. He sprayed blindly over his shoulder, again and again. He emptied half the canister. The man screamed a horrible, guttural scream and let go, clutching his eyes. My grandpa ran. He didn't look back until he was inside his house with the door locked. He never took that walk again. The stranger was never caught. I grew up in California for the first 14 years of my life. It wasn't the best neighborhood. It was Crip territory. If you don't know, the Crips are one of the most dangerous street gangs in Los Angeles. My best friend, Stevie D, lived 2 doors down. We were 12 years old, bored and stupid. We used to ride our bikes everywhere. One night, we decided to visit a well-known abandoned house on the corner. It had been empty for years. Nobody would buy it. The windows were boarded up, and the yard was overgrown. It was the perfect place for dares. We pulled up on our bikes to the front of the house. Stevie pointed at the living room window. "Look," he whispered. I pushed my bike closer and squinted through the dirty glass. There was a gap in the curtains, and in that gap, I saw a face. A person was sitting inside, peeking out at us. I couldn't tell if they were looking at us, but it was definitely a human face. Pale skin, dark eyes. It didn't move. It just stared. We stared back for what felt like 5 minutes. The face didn't blink, didn't breathe. That's when we realized something was wrong. It was too still. We inched closer, stepping onto the cracked driveway. We got right up to the glass. It wasn't a person, it was a head. Just a head, propped up on the windowsill. But it wasn't a Halloween decoration. The skin looked real, the hair looked real. Stevie whispered, "Let's go see." We were dumb kids. We snuck around the back. The door was already unlocked. Someone had been here. We stepped into the darkness. The house smelled like rotting meat. We made our way to the living room, our eyes adjusting to the dark. Stevie picked up the head from the windowsill. He screamed and dropped it instantly. It hit the floor with a wet, heavy thud. Dark liquid splashed out. It was blood. It was a real human head. We stood there frozen, looking at the ceiling. We heard cracks, creaking sounds, like someone walking upstairs or in the attic. Stevie grabbed my arm. We ran. We threw our bikes into the street and pedaled harder than we ever had in our lives. We didn't stop until we reached my house. The cops later told us the head belonged to a rival gang member. The Crips had placed it there as a message. But the worst part, the cops found footprints in the dust on the upstairs floor, fresh footprints. Whoever put that head there, or whoever it belonged to, was still in the house when we walked in. They were right above us. Last year, a knock came at our door around 9 p.m. We live in a rural area, miles from the nearest town. Nobody visits at 9 p.m. Nobody. I got my mom because I was too scared to answer it myself. She opened the door a crack. A man was standing there. He was smiling too wide. He started talking about opening a new American-made business. He handed her a Clorox container as a free sample. My mom is not stupid. She smelled the bullshit immediately. He pointed to a beat-up minivan parked in our driveway. "I have a vacuum cleaner in the van," he said. "Let me show you." My mom looked past him at the van. The windows were fogged up, but she saw the silhouette of another man inside, and another. There were 5 other men sitting in that van, just staring at the house. My mom's face didn't change. She smiled at the man and said, "Let me get my purse." She closed the door and locked it. She looked at me with wide eyes. "Run and get my phone, now." I couldn't find the phone. I panicked. Instead, I grabbed a large kitchen knife from the block and stood around the corner, my heart pounding in my ears. My mom threw open the door and threw the Clorox container at the man's feet. She didn't scream. She spoke in a low, dangerous voice. "Get the hell off my property right now, or I am calling the cops and I am blowing your head off." The man's smile vanished. He ran to the van. The tires screeched as they peeled out of the driveway, kicking up rocks. We watched the red taillights disappear down the dark country road. We called the police. They said there had been similar reports in the area. A group of men posing as salesmen to case houses, looking for easy targets, single women, isolated homes. We slept with the lights on for a week. We never saw the van again, but sometimes, late at night, I still think I hear an engine idling down by the road. I've always been an extreme sports person. Skiing is my life. One season, my friend Q and I decided to go backcountry camping. No patrols, no boundaries. Just us, the snow, and the wilderness. It was a 3-hour drive, then miles of off-roading. We parked my truck at the bottom of a valley and hiked a 1/4 mile with all our gear. Tents, sleeping bags, skis, food. We set up camp in a clearing. It was perfect. The next day, we hiked up a massive hill to scout for fresh powder. We split up to cover more ground. That was my first mistake. I was skiing down a steep run when I realized I had lost Q. I tried the walkie-talkie. Static. No answer. I figured I'd meet him at the bottom. At the base of the hill, I took off my skis and started walking. That's when I saw another skier. He was dressed in all black, orange backpack, ski mask covering his face. He sounded friendly. "Hey, buddy," he said. "Where are the best runs? You camping around here?" I pointed to the hill I just came down. I pointed in the direction of our camp. He smiled under his mask. I could see his teeth. He said, "Me and my wife are looking for a spot near other people. Can you lead me to your camp?" I didn't want to hike back. It was freezing, but I felt like I had to be a good guy. I grabbed my walkie and told Q I was heading back. We started walking. The guy kept talking, asking if I was alone, if anyone knew where I was. Red flags started popping up in my head. We reached the campsite. I turned to him. "Where's your wife?" I asked. He didn't answer. He started walking toward me, fast. That's when I recognized the orange backpack. It was Q's backpack. In that split second, I thought it was a prank, but the voice was wrong. This man was not my friend. He was 3 feet away. He pulled something out of his pocket. I didn't wait to see what it was. I dove head first into the tent. I was digging for my flare gun. I felt a sharp electric burn in my leg. I looked down. He had stabbed me. A knife was buried deep in my thigh. The pain was like fire. I screamed. I found the flare gun. I turned and pointed it at his face. He put his hands up and backed away. I looked at the knife in my leg. I looked at the man. "Where is my friend?" I screamed. He pointed toward the hill. "Near the bottom," he said. "He's unconscious." I called 911. The man ran away into the trees. I couldn't chase him. I sat in the snow, bleeding, for what felt like hours. I shot the flare into the sky. A rescue helicopter found me. They found Q lying in the snow, stabbed twice in the leg, robbed, barely alive. The man had used Q's walkie to try to lure me deeper into the woods. The connection was bad. We both survived, but I don't ski alone anymore, and I never talk to strangers on the mountain. I lived in a small college town. My apartment was walking distance from the bars. One weeknight, I was up late studying. I stepped onto the front porch to smoke a cigarette. I brought my textbook and laid down on the wooden stairs. A girl from the ground floor apartment came stumbling home. She was drunk, alone. She barely got her door closed when a guy came out of nowhere. He knocked on her door. She opened it. It was 2:30 in the morning. Who knocks on a stranger's door at 2:30 a.m.? I decided to stay outside and watch. They talked for 10 minutes. The guy was doing creepy things, reaching up and stroking her hair, leaning in too close, trying to inch his way inside the doorway. The girl looked uncomfortable. She didn't know how to tell him to leave. I made a point of slamming my textbook shut, loud. The guy looked over at me. His eyes were dead, empty. He saw me watching him. He turned and walked away into the darkness, just like that. No goodbye, just disappeared. The next day, the girl knocked on my door. She thanked me. We called the cops. They brought in a sketch artist. When the sketch was released to the public, the phone rang off the hook. Turns out the guy was a serial rapist. His routine was to follow drunk girls home from the bars and pretend to be a cab driver offering a ride. This girl lived so close to the bars that he didn't get a chance to pull the cab routine. He just followed her home. He was waiting for her to let him in. The cops caught him 3 days later. He had a rope and duct tape in his car. I stopped smoking on the porch after that, but I always look out the window when I hear someone walking home late. I used Craigslist once, just once. I was looking for a ping pong table for me and my roommate. I found a deal. The guy said, "Come pick it up tonight." I removed the back seats from my truck so the table would fit. I pulled up to his house. It was a normal house, suburban, quiet. I texted him I was here. The door opened. I walked up for a handshake. He didn't shake my hand. He just turned around and said, "Follow me to the basement," in a deep smoker's voice. The house smelled weird, like cotton candy mixed with smoke. We got to the basement. The ping pong table was right in the middle of the room. He said, "Oh shoot, I forgot the paddles," and ran back upstairs. The door clicked shut behind him. I waited. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I started looking around. Pictures on the walls. All of them were just him. No family, no friends. Just his face, over and over. There was a back room, a laundry room. I saw a desk drawer hanging half open. I pulled it all the way out. Inside were Polaroid pictures, old ones. I picked one up. My stomach dropped. It was a picture of a young girl. She was tied to a chair. duct tape over her mouth. Her eyes were wide with terror. I dropped the photo. There were more, dozens of them, all different girls, all tied up. Next to the photos were yellow folders, labeled A to Z. I didn't open them. I didn't want to know what was inside. I pulled out my phone to take pictures, but I had no service in the basement. I ran to the top of the stairs. The door was locked. I heard the man's voice on the other side. "Sorry about that," he rasped. "The door locks itself. I'll go find the key." I didn't answer. I ran back down to the desk. I grabbed 3 screwdrivers. I ran back up and started picking the lock. My hands were shaking. I heard him walking around upstairs, looking for a key or looking for a weapon. I don't know. The smallest screwdriver fit into the keyhole. I twisted. The lock clicked open. I didn't look back. I ran out the front door, jumped in my truck, and drove straight to the police station. I showed them the photos on my phone. I gave them the address. The police raided the house an hour later. They found the folders. They found videos. The man was part of a child pornography ring on the deep web. That's how he made his money. They never told me what was in those folders, but they thanked me. They said if I had opened that door to let him in, or if I had waited any longer, I would have been in the next photo. I threw my phone away. I never used Craigslist again. I used to babysit when I was 14. A 6-year-old boy named Cody. His parents gave me weird instructions. Cody has an imaginary friend named Agnes. He talks to her. Don't let him go in our room. That was it. Easy money. It was pouring rain outside. I was watching TV. Cody was on the floor playing with his toys. He was talking to the empty air. "No, Agnes, you do it." I ignored it. Kids have imaginations. Then one of his toys activated by itself. It was one of those crank toys that takes effort to wind up. It just started spinning. I asked Cody how that happened. He looked at me with serious eyes. "Agnes is playing with it." I turned the toy off. Later that night, I was in the bathroom washing my face. I heard a knock on the door. "Cody?" I said. No answer. I opened the door. The hallway was empty. But the door at the end of the hall started to creak open. Slowly, inch by inch. The lights were off in that room. I walked down the hallway, my heart in my throat. I pushed the door open. Cody was sitting on the bed in the far corner, just staring at me. "Cody," I said. "Who opened the door?" He pointed to the empty space next to him. "Agnes did." I grabbed Cody and ran back to the living room. I didn't let him out of my sight until his parents came home. I never babysat for them again. I don't care about imaginary friends, but that door shouldn't have opened by itself, and the air in that room was freezing cold. It was the middle of summer. Some kids aren't lying. Some kids see things we can't.